Imagine the desert wind whipping sand into the air, the sun beating down on two armies poised for collision. One is nearly invincible, a horde whose name evokes fear from Asia to the Levant. The other, smaller, less resourced, yet burning with purpose. In 1260, a clash at a place called Ain Jalut will decide not just who wins this battle, but whether entire cultures survive. Stay with me. You will witness strategy, courage, betrayal, and a turning point that changed the face of the world forever. The Mongol Empire, under Genghis Khan and his successors, grew rapidly across Eurasia, engulfing city after city, kingdom after kingdom. Their speed, brutality, and ability to adapt made them seemingly unstoppable. When Hulagu Khan marched into the heart of the Islamic world, Baghdad fell in 1258. Its libraries burned, its scholars killed or dispersed. The ripple effects were enormous, leaving Syria, Persia, and Egypt looking over their shoulders. Siege warfare, psychological terror, and alliances broken. The Mongols played them all. They appeared not merely to conquer, but to erase. Yet, all conquests have their limits: geography, culture, leadership. As Hulag's armies pushed into Syria, the line between military momentum and overextension began to blur. Supplying distant fronts, maintaining loyalty among vassals, and consolidating gains taxed the Mongol machine. Meanwhile, the people and rulers of the Middle East watched in horror and awe. There were rumors of massacres, depopulated cities, and invisible fear that traveled faster than messengers. Power shifted faster than alliances could adjust. In Egypt, meanwhile, a new force was rising: the Mamluks, once slaves, warrior slaves trained to fight, to endure. They crushed internal rivals, jockeyed for power, and established themselves as the defenders of the realm. Under the leadership of men like Kutus and Baybars, they readied themselves, not merely against crusaders or local rivals, but against the seemingly invincible Mongol threat. The urgency of the moment grounded their resolve. For many, the question was no longer whether to resist, but how. After the ravaging of Baghdad and the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate's heart, Hulagu continued into Syria. Cities like Aleppo, Homs, and Damascus succumbed. The Mongol generals demanded submission. Some rulers complied, hoping to save their lives, their cities. Others were crushed for refusing. The echo of destruction spread ahead of them by word of mouth. Refugees, fleeing murder and subjugation, carried stories of monstrous efficiency, perhaps to dehumanize the invader. That fear hung heavy in the air. Egypt, however, stood out, both geographically and spiritually, as the last major power baring its teeth toward the advancing storm. Under Sultan Kutus, heavy burdens fell: protect the people, preserve Islam's institutions, prevent the Mongols' momentum from reaching the Nile. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The resources of Cairo, the wealth of Egypt, the keys to trade, religion, culture, all risked. And yet, internal politics threatened to fracture any unified resistance, as intrigues and rivalries within the Mamluk elite simmered. Amid this pressure, Kutus accepted no compromise. The Mongols sent envoys demanding submission. Kutus refused. Then came the moment of defiance, the killing of envoys and displaying their heads at Cairo's gate. Some saw it as recklessness, others as necessary. It was a gamble, both message and warning. The die was cast. No future of peace under Mongol overlordship, only confrontation. All eyes turned to the north, toward the place where fate would decide. Sultan Kutus might have been the political head, but Baybars emerged as the tactical and charismatic heart of Mamluk resistance. Baybars had once served under others, had known defeat, betrayal, exile, but he was made stronger by each trial. He understood loyalty and sacrifice. He also understood terrain, valleys, springs, hills, knowledge that would be decisive. Baybars and Kutus, in uneasy partnership, formed the dual burden of strategy and statcraft. Kitbuka, the Mongol general, was no less formidable. Battle-scarred, commanding veterans, famed for daring, ruthless in approach. His army was confident, seasoned. Many among them believed that the momentum of Mongol expansion was divine, inevitable. All their past victories reinforced that conviction. When they marched north of the Euphrates, many presumed that Egypt would be but another domino, underestimating opposition that would prove costly. Underneath this confrontation was a series of minor skirmishes, probing attacks, and reconnaissance missions. The Mamluks sent spies and scouts. The Mongols prided themselves on information, but their size made stealth difficult. Baybars studied supply lines, gathered intelligence about water sources, springs, passes. He negotiated allegiances with smaller states, made sure that local populations would either support or at least not block movement. Every horse, every archer, every supply wagon mattered in the calculation. Nature is a silent commander in war. Baybars and Kutus selected Ain Jalut not by chance but by design. It lay near springs, water essential for armies. It was near ridges and wooded hills, places where Mongol cavalry would be less able to maneuver freely. The terrain would soften their advantage. Control of water, high ground, concealment, all important. The choice of battlefield is often half the battle itself. Supply lines mattered, too. For the Mamluks, moving from Egypt northwards, ensuring food, water, rest was easier in certain passes. They prepared supply depots, pre-positioned food, ensured that their troops would not be weakened by thirst or hunger. For Mongols, much of their strength came from mobility, but mobility that depends on forage, on logistical adaptability. The farther they advanced without supply, the more fragile their position. As the two armies approached Ain Jalut, the Mamluks made feints, scouts tested the Mongols' reactions. The locals whispered rumors of ambushes, false retreats. Kitbuka's scouts reported some Mamluk forces seen withdrawing, some hills showing movement. Baybars hid his main force in folds of hills, shaded by trees or terrain ridges. The Mongols, confident, believed they saw weakness. They read retreat as retreat. They read silence as consent. On the morning of the 3rd of September 1260, the two armies awoke knowing the stakes. The air was dry, heat rising. Water springs called. The Mongols arrayed in classic cavalries, horse archers, heavy cavalry, war machines, their vassals and auxiliaries by their sides. On the Mamluk side, disciplined cavalry, foot soldiers, and archers, many locals familiar with the land. The tension was thick, banners fluttered. The drums and horns sounded. Kitbuka, commanding from within, expected a swift conclusion. He saw the Mamluk right flank skirmishing, pulling back. He saw what seemed like confusion or weakness. He tightened his formation, sent scouts forward, ordered sustained pressure. The Mongol arrows flew. Volleys of arrows shadowed the hills. Their horses stamped, their commanders shouted in Khalkha or whatever tongue they used, urging speed and aggression. Baybars and Kutus watched. They did not overcommit early. They held reserves. On the flanks and hills, small detachments were waiting. The feigned retreat was already unfolding, skirmishers provoking, retreating, drawing Mongol horse archers into pursuit. Every unit on the Mamluk side was told exactly when to pull back, where to hide, who would remain visible to lure the adversary. The nervousness in the Mongol center hinted that something was coming. Like a snake drawing prey, the Mamluk skirmishers darted, fired arrows, withdrew. Each retreat appeared genuine. Mongol horse archers accustomed to chasing, pressing, harrying retreating foes pursued eagerly. They believed they had the upper hand, momentum, the initiative, they pressed further into terrain that grew more uncertain. Hills, gullies, patches of forest, hidden ambush positions. Meanwhile, the Mamluk reserves, hidden among ridges and behind hills, waited. Baybar's reserve cavalry and infantry remained still, invisible, or masked by terrain. The Mamluks had carefully timed this. Once the Mongols were far enough in, spread thin, and their formations stretched, the trap would close. Not too early, not too late. The moment required patience under pressure, trust in leadership, confidence in planning. Then the signal came. Hidden Mamluk forces broke cover, attacked from flanks and rear. Archers loosed arrows into the stretched Mongol line. Cavalry charged, catching outmaneuvered Mongol horsemen off guard. Confusion erupted. The pursuit became disorder. Mongol formations, designed for flexible offense, found themselves resisting instead, unable to maintain cohesion. The turning point had arrived. As arrows rained, the Mongol center felt pressure from both sides. Orders shouted, commanders tried to rally troops. But communication across such a spread-out army in rough terrain was difficult. Horses slipped, riders lost footing. Horses and men tired under sun, dust, and arrow fire. Meanwhile, the Mamluks pressed forward with heavy cavalry, closing in, striking hard where the Mongols were vulnerable. Kitbuka, seeing the flanks fold, attempted to pull back, to reorganize. He tried to rally his vassals, reinforce weak spots, but the encirclement tightened. Mamluk cavalry, having the high ground and interior lines, struck swiftly at exposed Mongol units. The famed Mongol discipline could not fully compensate for the disadvantage of terrain and surprise. Many Mongol units, unaware of the full scale of ambush, fell headlong into crossfire. Panic crept in. In that moment, dejection replaced confidence. The Mongols attempted retreat. Some succeeded in slipping through broken lines, but many were cut off. Kitbuka himself was either captured or killed. Sources differ, but in any case, his presence on the field ended. With their leader gone, organization collapsed. What began as a grand pursuit ended as chaotic flight. The greatest storm of conquest was broken. The dust settled. Silence replaced clashing swords. Survivors gathered what they could: horses, wounded, dead. The Mamluks secured the battlefield. They tended the wounded, shame and loss among their own, but victory in their hearts. Overturned wagons, scattered armor, abandoned weapons testified to the intensity. The stench of blood and sweat lingered, but so did triumph. Mamluk soldiers searched for fleeing Mongols, pursued some toward Bison and beyond. They freed captives, gathered intelligence through prisoners. They sent word back to Cairo: the Mongols have been stopped. Baybars and Kutus walked among their troops, offering praise, consoling loss, forging unity via shared sacrifice. The victory was hard won, lives had been lost, but nothing like defeat. In the days that followed, Damascus was recaptured. Other cities followed. The political map shifted. Mongol influence for the moment withdrew. Mamluk control over Syria deepened. The morale of Islamic states surged, and the world watched merchants, clerics, travelers to see whether this was ephemeral or was the beginning of a new order. In Cairo, Kutuz's triumph reverberated. His decision to stand, to defy, had paid off. The people celebrated. Scholars praised. The religious authorities recognized that the Mongols had been repelled, protecting Islam's sanctuaries. The legitimacy of the Mamluk regime solidified. The Sultan's choices, risky, controversial, now seen as courageous and wise. But power comes at a price. Court intrigues, rivalry simmered beneath the surface. Baybars, whose strategic brilliance had been crucial, harbored ambitions. There were whispers in the halls of the palace. Qutuz knew he owed much to Baybars, but also feared his shadow. Political assassinations, betrayals, always lurking specters in medieval courts, waited for opportunity. Meanwhile, relatives of conquered or aligned rulers, displaced nobles, refugees, looked for new patronage. Some switched allegiance to the Mamluks. Others plotted with the Mongols, seeking revenge or restoration. Diplomacy became as important as war. Treaties, non-aggression pacts, bribes, marriages, all tools in the aftermath of such a consequential battle. Mamluks now had to defend not just borders, but legitimacy. For the Mongols, the defeat was a major shock. Up to that point, their reputation had seemed unassailable. Kit Buka's loss, both tactical and symbolic, forced reassessment. Retreat was mandatory. While retreat meant loss of face, it also offered opportunities to regroup, rearm, to marshal reinforcements. But the psychological blow was heavy. The chain of command scrambled. Vassal troops lost heart, desertions increased. The Mongols could still impose terror elsewhere, but their westward momentum stalled. Egypt was no longer a soft target. Emirs and governors who once considered submission now hesitated. Alliances shifted. Some Mongol allies defected or negotiated peace. Others tried to stoke divisions among the Mamluks, seeking indirect ways of influence. Back in the Mongol heartlands, news of Ain Jalut spread. Chronicles recorded this for posterity, that the Mamluks had stopped the tide. Strategists re-examined assumptions. No longer could region after region fall simply by reputation or fear. Ain Jalut became a warning. Every battle required preparation. Every enemy could find strength in unity and terrain. For the Mongols, resilience would require adaptation. Because of Ain Jalut, cities like Cairo, Damascus, Mecca, Medina remained under rulers who valued Islamic learning, architecture, scholarship, religion. Had the Mongols pressed on and conquered Egypt directly, many institutions might have been destroyed or radically transformed. Mosques, schools, libraries, all could have suffered under foreign rule less sympathetic to Islamic traditions. Mamluk rule after this battle invested heavily in religious endowments, building mosques, madrasas, establishing scholars, preserving manuscripts. The preservation of Arabic science, Islamic jurisprudence, and culture benefited from the political stability that victory brought. Histories, both religious and secular, continued to flourish. Merchants traded safely across restored routes. Pilgrims could journey without fear. Moreover, the psychological edge for Muslims was restored. The narrative of invincibility for the Mongols was broken. Islamic states, previously resigned to fear, felt possibility. The idea that resistance, well-organized and courageous, could succeed even against overwhelming odds took root. Ain Jalut echoed in sermons, poems, chronicles. It became part of identity and memory. One lesson is the importance of terrain. Baybar's use of hills, springs, passages to limit cavalry mobility, to conceal reserves. Where open plains favor cavalry, hills and enclosed ground favor ambush and defense. The strategic patience in feigning retreat is old, but rarely used effectively. Here it worked because of discipline and timing. Another lesson lies in leadership. Hutus and Baybars had to trust their men, trust their intelligence, resist panic, commit reserves at the right moment. The courage of field commanders, the morale of ordinary soldiers, and the presence of a unifying cause, religious, political, all mattered. Also, knowing when not to engage directly, but to lure the opponent into vulnerability. Also, logistical readiness, ensuring supply of water, food, controlling access to water springs, maintaining communication across units. The Mongol strength and mobility can be blunted when supply is stretched, when forage is lacking, when terrain slows down horse archers. Battle is not only fought in swords and arrows, but in wagons, food, rest, and morale. If Kitbuka had pressed harder, or if the Mamluk ambush had failed, Mongols might have taken Egypt rapidly. With control over the Nile Valley, they could have directed campaigns further west into North Africa. The learning centers in Cairo could have been destroyed or repurposed. The control of trade routes, Red Sea, Mediterranean, could shift in favor of Mongol allies. If Egypt fell, then the Islamic heartland would likely undergo dramatic change. Religious institutions might be suppressed. Islamic jurisprudence, those political structures of caliphates or sultanates, might become instruments of Mongol rule. Languages, legal codes, culture could be altered. The pilgrimage to Mecca might be controlled, taxed. The balance between Sunni and Shia, between different Islamic schools, might tilt under foreign influence. On a global scale, Europe might feel the ripple. A stronger Mongol presence in the Middle East could threaten crusader states again, or push further toward the Mediterranean. Alliances between Christian Europe and Mongols might have been more attractive. Cultural exchange could go another way, but likely marked by coercion. History as we know it, the rise of Ottoman Empire, the shape of modern Middle East, would be unrecognizable. Over centuries, many stories about Ain Jalut have been told, some accurate, some embellished. Chroniclers spoke of Qutuz removing his helmet so soldiers would know him. Speeches invoking "O Islam" were recorded, though exact words vary. Some accounts inflated numbers of troops. Others minimized Mongol losses. Myth-making is natural when stakes are monumental. Some later historians framed the battle as inevitable, as if the Mongols were bound to lose. Others claim it was sheer luck. But the deeper truth, courage and preparation, choice of terrain, intelligence, leadership, all combined. Myths serve to inspire, but prudent analysis separates symbolism from fact. We must treat reports carefully, cross-compare sources, note biases. Chroniclers often aim to glorify rulers or faiths. Also, later rulers used Ain Jalut in their propaganda to legitimize their own reigns, to claim continuity with those who resisted Mongols, to foster unity. Even today, in modern collective memory, Ain Jalut appears in literature, art, sermons, national histories. It is a battle that lives beyond its fact, becoming meaning. That's part of its power, not only what happened, but what it means. Today, Ain Jalut is more than a battle from centuries ago. It is a symbol of resistance against overwhelming foes. A story that crosses borders, religions, cultures. In textbooks, documentaries, lectures, it is held up when people ask, how do small states defend themselves? How can strategy matter as much as strength? In modern military academies, lessons from Ain Jalut still resonate about asymmetric warfare, about leveraging terrain, about morale and leadership. In cultural discussions, it reminds people that history is not always determined by the biggest army or the strongest force, but often by cleverness, unity, choice. In political rhetoric, it has sometimes been invoked, perhaps rightly, perhaps selectively, to inspire. Even for ordinary people, Ain Jalut reminds us that history can be changed, that in moments of crisis, choices, courage, faith, leadership matter, that a single battle, though bloody and terrifying, can be a turning point, and that our world, shaped by those turning points, still carries their echoes. The past is never completely past. The clash at Ain Jalut was not just one battle among many. It was the moment the tide turned, when the march of conquest paused, when faith and strategy held together against overwhelming fear. If you've joined me through this journey, you've witnessed how tactics, terrain, leadership, sacrifice all came together to change history. If we heed these stories, we understand what it means when people resist, when cultures defend themselves, when what seems inevitable can yet be stopped. Thank you for watching.